January 1943. The sun rises over the rolling fields of England, its pale light glinting off the polished noses of P-51 Mustangs lined up on the concrete runway. Engines roar to life, a deep mechanical growl that shakes the air and sets the heartbeat of every pilot pounding in rhythm. Cold wind bites through leather jackets, but there is an electric anticipation. Today they fly into the skies over occupied Europe, where every second can mean life or death. Inside the cockpit, hands grip the controls with practiced precision. Ahead lies the familiar metallic weight of the Browning M2, a half-inch of concentrated firepower mounted in the wings, trusted more than any other companion in the sky. Pilots speak in quiet nods and clipped gestures. Each one knows that when the dogfights begin, this weapon will decide who survives and who falls. Below, the ground crews wave, a blur of movement against the static backdrop of hangars and fuel trucks. But the pilot's world narrows to altitude, speed, and the hum of engines. Somewhere beyond the clouds, enemy fighters wait, their own weapons less reliable, their fate already influenced by the instrument of American ingenuity and craftsmanship that rests in the wings of these planes. The moment of departure hangs, taut and expectant. Then, as the throttles push forward, the Mustangs surge down the runway, and the war above Europe begins once more, every trigger pull a testament to trust, skill, and the unyielding reliability of the Browning M2. The story of the Browning M2 begins long before the first American fighter climbed into combat. In the 1910s, John Moses Browning, one of history's most prolific firearms designers, began work on what would become an enduring symbol of American military engineering. His initial designs for the scene, .30 caliber machine gun during the First World War, emphasized reliability, simplicity, and adaptability, principles that would carry forward into the interwar period. By the 1930s, as the shadow of conflict stretched across Europe and Asia, the United States Army and Navy sought a heavier, more potent aircraft armament. The result was the .50 caliber Browning M2, a weapon that combined firepower, resilience, and the capacity to operate under the harshest conditions, from Arctic cold to desert heat. Unlike many European designs, the M2 was conceived with maintainability in mind. Its components could be disassembled and cleaned in minutes, its parts standardized across multiple aircraft platforms. American military doctrine valued not only the raw lethality of weapons, but also their dependability in sustained campaigns. Engineers paired these ideals with the industrial strength of the United States, which was already preparing for the scale of global warfare to come. Factories in Connecticut, Michigan, and Pennsylvania churned out thousands of M2 cells long before the US officially entered the conflict, ensuring that the planes that would carry them could be armed without delay. In contrast, the Axis powers faced different engineering priorities. German and Japanese aircraft machine guns, such as the MG-131 or the Czech AAs, often emphasized weight reduction, rate of fire, or compactness over long-term reliability. Many European and Asian designs were mechanically complex, prone to jamming under extended use, or difficult to repair in the field. American engineers understood that air combat was unforgiving. A single misfire could mean death for the pilot and the loss of a strategic bomber. The M2, sturdy and straightforward, was built to survive both the fury of the air battle and the maintenance realities of war. By the late 1930s, the United States had integrated the M2 into its growing fleet of fighters and bombers. Aircraft such as the P-36 Hawk and the early P-40 Warhawk were designed to accommodate the heavy .50 caliber weapon. Pilots, mechanics, and tacticians quickly recognized its advantages. Its rounds could pierce armored fighters, damage engines, and suppress enemy gunners with a consistency unmatched by foreign counterparts. The gun's versatility extended beyond air-to-air combat. It became essential for strafing runs against ground targets, supply convoys, and fortified positions. As Europe descended into war in 1939 and the Pacific Theater expanded in 1941, the United States faced the challenge of preparing both men and machines for modern aerial warfare. Strategic planning emphasized pilot training, coordinated tactics, and, crucially, equipping aircraft with weapons that would not fail at critical moments. The Browning M2 emerged not simply as a tool of destruction, but as a symbol of an American philosophy: fight smart, fight hard, and trust in your machine as much as your own skill. In the cockpit, that trust would soon become a matter of life and death. The foundation was set. Pilots would learn that survival in the skies depended on more than courage. It depended on having a weapon that would work when it mattered most. The stage was now ready for the M2's first true test in combat. By late 1941, American aircraft equipped with the Browning M2 were entering the first theaters of conflict. In the deserts of North Africa, P-40 Warhawks from the 33rd Fighter Group climbed into the blazing sun, their engines rattling against the heat. Pilots quickly discovered that the half-inch rounds of the M2 were devastating against lightly armored Axis aircraft. Messerschmitt Bf 109S and Italian Macchi fighters, fast but lightly protected, could be brought down with disciplined bursts from the twin-wing M2S. Combat reports from these early encounters repeatedly highlighted a singular advantage: the gun rarely jammed, even in sand-blown cockpits where other weapons failed. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American forces were preparing to join the air war over Europe. P-38 Lightnings and early P-51 Mustangs were fitted with multiple Browning M2 Sears in wing and nose mounts. Fighter pilots emphasized reliability above all. In dogfights, fractions of a second could decide survival, and the M2 consistently delivered. Tales circulated of squadrons returning from missions with aircraft riddled by enemy fire, yet the guns continued to function without a single stoppage. Even under prolonged strafing runs against trains, convoys, and flak positions, the weapon maintained its fire rate and accuracy. Axis aircraft crews noticed the difference. German and Japanese fighters were often armed with lighter, more compact guns designed for short bursts. In extended engagements, their weapons overheated or jammed, leaving pilots exposed. Reports from Luftwaffe intelligence noted an unusual consistency in American firepower. Pilots were not only shooting with skill, but their guns were reliable under every condition. The disparity was as much mechanical as tactical, shaping the unfolding battles in subtle but decisive ways. Back on the ground, American mechanics reinforced this advantage. Pre-flight inspections revealed that the M2 required minimal maintenance to function optimally, a feature that proved invaluable on forward airstrips where time and resources were limited. Ammunition belts could be loaded in moments, and stripped components reassembled without specialized tools. Pilots learned to trust not only their own abilities, but the design of the weapon itself, a rare combination that would soon define air combat strategy. By the end of 1942, American squadrons were fully dependent on the Browning M2, from North Africa to the skies above Europe, and eventually the Pacific. The weapon became more than steel and cartridges. It was a lifeline. Every sortie, every dogfight, every strafing run was conducted with the quiet confidence that the gun would function flawlessly. This reliability shaped tactics, influenced pilot behavior, and set the stage for the M2's enduring reputation. The groundwork of development and early deployment had been laid. What followed was a deeper exploration of the angles that made the Browning M2 exceptional: human experience, tactical advantage, technological superiority, and the challenges faced by the Axis in trying to counter it. In the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang, the pilot's world shrinks to a narrow strip of sky, instruments, and the sights of the enemy. Each dogfight is measured in seconds, each maneuver a delicate balance of speed, altitude, and instinct. Amid this chaos, the Browning M2 becomes more than metal. It is an extension of the pilot's will. Veterans recalled gripping the control stick, finger poised on the trigger, trusting that the gun would respond without hesitation. There was no room for doubt, no margin for mechanical failure. The confidence it inspired allowed pilots to focus on strategy, positioning, and survival, rather than worrying whether their weapons would jam at the worst possible moment. Tactically, the M2 reshaped aerial combat. Twin or quad-mounted in wings, its heavy rounds could punch through armored fuselages and engines with precision. Fighter groups adapted their maneuvers around this firepower, planning attacks that relied on sustained bursts rather than single, desperate shots. Strafing runs against airfields and convoys became increasingly effective, as the gun's combination of range, velocity, and stopping power made every round count. Pilots learned to engage enemies at distances that maximized damage while minimizing exposure, a practice that often tilted the balance of battle before a second shot was even fired. The human element extended beyond skill to psychological impact. Pilots knew the stories of comrades lost to faulty weapons or jammed guns, tales that haunted every mission. In contrast, the M2's reliability provided a rare comfort. Young aviators facing their first combat sorties described a sense of partnership with the gun itself, as if the aircraft's metal skeleton were a silent guardian. The combination of instinct, training, and dependable firepower created a subtle, almost intimate relationship between man and machine, a bond forged under the unforgiving conditions of war. On the tactical level, squadron commanders adjusted formations and attack patterns to exploit the M2's advantages. Long-range escorts of bombers relied on concentrated firepower from multiple Mustangs, each firing coordinated bursts that overwhelmed enemy gunners. Engagements over Europe often showcased the cumulative effect. An Axis fighter, attempting evasive maneuvers, would find itself consistently tracked and hit by rounds that maintained velocity and accuracy across hundreds of meters. The M2 was not simply a weapon, it was the linchpin of a tactical doctrine that emphasized preparation, precision, and trust in both pilot skill and equipment. By merging human resolve with technological reliability, American pilots gained an edge that often determined the outcome of aerial encounters. The M2's presence allowed strategies that would have been impossible with less dependable armament, giving squads the confidence to press attacks, protect bombers, and return home alive. Yet even as pilots relied on this machine, the engineers who created it continued to refine its design, ensuring that reliability remained uncompromised. This interplay of human determination and mechanical consistency set the stage for the next layer of perspective, the technological and enemy angle, where engineering mastery would clash with Axis limitations. The Browning M2's reputation was not earned solely through pilot anecdotes. It was a triumph of engineering. Designed for both air and ground platforms, the weapon combined simplicity with resilience. Its short recoil operation allowed rounds to be fired at a sustained rate of 400 to 600 rounds per minute, while the half-inch caliber delivered immense kinetic energy capable of tearing through aircraft skins and engine compartments. Unlike lighter foreign designs, the M2 could tolerate extreme heat, dust, or frigid conditions without misfiring. Its feed system, using disintegrating or continuous belts, minimized stoppages, while field-serviceable components ensured rapid repairs even on forward airstrips. The gun's dependability was the product of decades of refinement, a marriage of precision engineering and industrial foresight. Axis designers faced different challenges. German weapons such as the MG-131 or MG-151 favored compactness and high rates of fire, but often at the expense of reliability under sustained use. Japanese designs, while lightweight and fast-firing, were prone to jamming in humid conditions and struggled with belt feed systems. Engineers in Berlin and Tokyo had to balance firepower with structural limitations of their aircraft, leaving them with weapons that could excel in brief engagements, but faltered in prolonged combat. Intelligence reports from the Luftwaffe and Imperial Japanese Navy acknowledged the frustrating consistency of American guns. Pilots often returned from sorties to recount losses, not from skill deficits, but from an inability to match the M2's durability. This technological disparity had tactical consequences. American aircraft could deliver longer bursts with confidence, while Axis pilots were constrained by overheating barrels or jammed rounds. In bomber escort missions, P-51 Sand, P-38 Sands could suppress enemy fighters from distance, engaging in tactical maneuvers that leveraged their guns' accuracy. German and Japanese pilots, aware of their mechanical vulnerabilities, often hesitated, reduced fire, or split formations to compensate. Even experienced aces were forced into defensive postures when confronted with the combination of pilot skill and a weapon that refused to fail. Beyond design, American industrial capacity reinforced the technological advantage. Mass production ensured consistency across thousands of units. A gun manufactured in Pennsylvania was functionally identical to one produced in Connecticut. Standardized parts meant rapid replacements and minimal downtime. Training programs emphasized maintenance and field repairs, so the gun's reliability extended beyond factory specifications into the harshest combat conditions. Pilots and ground crews became partners in preserving this advantage, a seamless interface between human skill and mechanical precision. The Axis forces could not replicate this equilibrium. Their weapons, though effective in theory, were inconsistent under operational stress. The Browning MEM-2 demonstrated that superiority in war was not simply a matter of design or caliber. It was the combination of engineering foresight, production consistency, and operational integration. As the skies filled with the roar of engines and tracer fire, this technological edge translated directly into survival and tactical dominance, and as the M2 continued to prove itself in early engagements, the stage was set for the decisive turning points that would define the air war itself. By 1944, the Browning M2 had become a decisive factor in the skies over Europe. On a crisp February morning, the 4th Fighter Group prepared to escort B-17 bombers from their bases in England deep into German airspace. Pilots checked instruments, adjusted throttle, and verified their guns. The M2, mounted in the wings of each Mustang, gleamed in the cold sunlight, a promise of lethal precision. Intelligence predicted heavy opposition. Luftwaffe fighters scrambled to intercept the formation over the Ruhr Valley. As the Mustangs climbed into the winter sky, the first enemy aircraft appeared, a dozen Messerschmitt Bf 109 Cessna descending in a classic ambush formation. Mustang pilots, relying on the reliability of their Browning MEM-2 Cess, engaged immediately. Bursts of half-inch rounds tore through fuselages and wings, sending German aircraft spinning to the ground. Pilots reported that even under the continuous fire of extended dogfights, the guns never faltered, allowing precise sustained suppression that disrupted enemy tactics. In the cockpit, every pull of the trigger was executed with calm assurance. The weapon responded instantly with predictable recoil and trajectory, freeing pilots to concentrate on maneuvering and formation strategy. The impact of the MA-2 was not limited to air-to-air combat. During strafing runs on supply lines in France, pilots found that the gun's rounds could shred lightly armored trucks, destroy rail cars, and neutralize anti-aircraft positions. Fleets of P-38 Lightnings over Italy demonstrated similar efficiency. Targets were engaged with consistent firepower at longer ranges than the Axis guns could manage. Reports from the field emphasized a recurring theme: enemy fire often failed to hit because American pilots could dictate engagement distances, exploiting both tactical positioning and the superior performance of their weapons. In the Pacific theater, reliability mattered even more. P-40 Sur, and later P-38, strafed Japanese airfields in the Solomons and the Philippines. Humid, salty air, engine vibrations and long sorties were lethal tests for any weapon. The M2 continued to function flawlessly, while Japanese aircraft armed with 7.7mm or 13.2mm guns experienced stoppages or overheating. Pilots observed that Japanese defensive fire was inconsistent, often outmatched by the disciplined bursts from the American fighters. Survival statistics reflected this advantage. Squadrons with M2-equipped aircraft suffered fewer losses in prolonged engagements, and enemy losses mounted disproportionately. Even during high-altitude bomber escort missions over Germany in the spring of 1944, when Luftwaffe pilots had the advantage of radar-guided interception, the Browning M2 maintained its role as a critical enabler. Mustangs and Lightnings could engage multiple targets, protect the bombers, and suppress enemy formations without a single gun failure reported across squadrons. The combination of pilot skill and mechanical reliability created a psychological and tactical edge that would reverberate through every engagement in the months to come. The first wave of critical engagements had proven the M2's worth beyond doubt. American pilots survived where others might have fallen. Enemy formations faltered under sustained fire, and air combat began to favor those who trusted not only their own reflexes, but a weapon that would never betray them. The war in the skies had reached a turning point, where engineering, strategy, and human courage converged into moments of decisive action. By mid-1944, the influence of the Browning M2 was unmistakable. During the long-range escort missions over Germany, P-51 Mustangs flew in coordinated formations, their M2 cell loaded with ammunition for sustained engagement. On a mission in March, the 352nd Fighter Group encountered a large formation of Focke-Wulf 4-190 SES, attempting to intercept a squadron of B-17 bombers. Within minutes, the sky erupted with tracer fire. American pilots relied on the unerring consistency of their wing-mounted M2s, delivering controlled bursts that shredded enemy fighters mid-air. Reports later indicated that the group downed over a dozen 4-190 SES without a single Mustang suffering a mechanical failure in its armament. The statistical impact was equally striking. Across multiple theaters, analysis showed that aircraft equipped with MS-2S achieved kill ratios significantly higher than Axis aircraft with comparable missions. In the European theater, bomber losses decreased as escort squadrons with reliable firepower maintained dominance over the Luftwaffe. Pacific campaigns reflected similar trends. Strafing runs on Japanese airfields and shipping lanes became highly effective operations, with the M2 enabling precision that heavier or less reliable weapons could not provide. Individual pilots became legends, in part because of the Browning MEMS-2. Aces such as Colonel Don Blakesley of the 4th Fighter Group credited their success to a combination of skill, strategy, and the consistent performance of their guns. In the thick of dogfights, pilots relied on the predictable recoil, velocity, and firing rate of the M2 to execute split-second decisions. The weapon's reliability allowed maneuvers that would have been impossible with a gun prone to jamming, overheating, or misfiring. Each successful engagement reinforced confidence, creating a feedback loop of skill and trust between pilot and machine. The Axis, meanwhile, struggled to adapt. German engineers attempted incremental improvements to the MG-131 and MG-151, but production limitations and the mechanical complexity of their designs prevented parity. Japanese pilots contended with environmental challenges that compromised their weapons' function. The M2's superiority forced enemy pilots into defensive tactics, reducing their offensive effectiveness and altering entire engagement strategies. Across both continents, the American advantage became self-reinforcing. Reliable firepower enabled more aggressive and coordinated attacks, which in turn further suppressed enemy capabilities. By the autumn of 1944, the air war had decisively shifted. Missions that once involved calculated risk now leaned heavily in favor of the Americans. The Browning MEM-2 had become more than a weapon. It was a strategic multiplier, amplifying pilot skill, squadron coordination, and the overall effectiveness of the Allied air campaign. The turning point was clear. In battles where lives hung in the balance, the M2 delivered a constant certainty that no Axis weapon could match. The peak impact of the Browning M2 reshaped aerial warfare, setting the stage for the aftermath, where the consequences of this technological and tactical advantage would be measured not only in destroyed aircraft, but in altered strategies, survival rates, and the enduring legacy of American airpower. The first clear measure of the Browning MEM-2's impact appeared immediately after the 1944 air campaigns over Europe. Squadron reports detailed a consistent pattern. American pilots flying M2-equipped aircraft returned with minimal losses, while enemy aircraft were reduced in number and morale. Bomber crews, previously vulnerable to fighters, found an unprecedented level of protection. B-17 and B-24 formations, once exposed to sustained Luftwaffe attacks, now benefited from the precise, reliable bursts delivered by Mustang and Lightning squadrons. Mission after mission, the M2 proved itself as more than a tool. It was a decisive force multiplier. Maintenance reports from airfields reinforced this advantage. While other nations' weapons required frequent servicing or replacement, the M2 demanded little beyond routine inspections. Ground crews praised its modular design. Barrels could be swapped in moments, belts loaded quickly, and misfires were rare. This reliability extended the operational lifespan of aircraft and allowed more sorties with fewer interruptions, a factor that directly contributed to the Allied air superiority in 1944 and 1945. Axis pilots and strategists took note. German Luftwaffe reports cited frustration with American aircraft that could deliver longer bursts without malfunction. Japanese fighter squadrons faced similar disadvantages in the Pacific, where high humidity, corrosion and extended engagements exposed the limits of their weapons. The M2's consistency allowed American forces to dictate terms of engagement, selecting distance, timing and tactical positioning to maximum effect. Even on a human level, the immediate consequences were profound. Pilots trusted their guns implicitly, reducing hesitation in critical moments and enabling bolder tactics. Aircrews reported fewer near misses due to mechanical failure, allowing focus to remain on evasive maneuvers and target acquisition. Psychologically, confidence in the M2 became a force in itself, shaping morale, cohesion, and the willingness to press attacks against numerically superior enemies. By the end of 1944, the results were unmistakable. The M2 had not only changed the outcomes of individual sorties, but had reshaped the broader air campaign. American air power was no longer just a question of pilot skill. It was reinforced by a weapon whose reliability could be counted on, mission after mission. These immediate consequences paved the way for a broader understanding of the M2's long-term influence, both on aerial strategy and on the post-war development of aircraft armament. The legacy of the Browning Me M2 extended far beyond the immediate outcomes of World War II. In the years following 1945, its design principles influenced generations of aircraft and ground-mounted weaponry. Military planners recognized that reliability under extreme conditions was as vital as raw firepower. The M2's success underscored a simple but critical lesson. A weapon that pilots and crews could depend on fundamentally changed the dynamics of combat. Its engineering served as a blueprint for post-war machine guns, influencing both American and Allied developments for decades. Aircraft armament doctrines evolved as a direct result. The emphasis shifted from maximizing rate of fire to balancing accuracy, range, and maintainability. Fighter design incorporated redundancy and ease of maintenance, lessons drawn directly from the operational history of the M2. Squadrons trained to integrate their tactics around weapons they could trust, creating an enduring culture of technical discipline and operational reliability. Even during the Korean and Vietnam Wars, aircraft retained variants of the .50 caliber M2, a testament to its unmatched performance and adaptability. The Axis power's inability to replicate the M2's reliability also shaped post-war perceptions. German and Japanese designs, which had prioritized compactness and theoretical efficiency, were studied and contrasted with American engineering philosophy. Allied forces concluded that durability, maintainability, and production standardization were decisive factors in large-scale aerial operations. The lessons of the M2 informed industrial strategies, guiding the manufacture of weapons for both peacetime and potential conflict. Beyond engineering and doctrine, the Browning M2 left a cultural imprint. Pilot stories, memoirs, and official reports consistently highlighted the psychological security the gun provided. The confidence it instilled allowed risk-taking and precision, attributes that directly influenced mission success. Veterans described the weapon with respect and reverence, not simply for its lethality, but for its unwavering reliability in moments of life and death. By the late 1940s, the M2 had secured a permanent place in both American military history and global recognition. It was not merely a tool of war, it was a symbol of an industrial philosophy and technological foresight that gave Allied pilots a decisive edge. The immediate victories it facilitated evolved into lasting strategic lessons, shaping the future of air combat, weapons development, and military engineering for generations. The story of the Browning M2 thus moves naturally into reflection, a calm consideration of what this weapon meant for pilots, for strategy, and for the enduring principles of reliable engineering in human conflict. The Browning M2 was more than steel and ammunition. It was a testament to foresight, precision, and trust. In the cockpit, it became a silent partner, a constant presence that allowed pilots to act decisively, to maneuver, to survive. Across continents and oceans, its reliability shaped not only the outcome of battles, but the very approach to aerial warfare, demonstrating that technology and human skill are inseparable in the crucible of combat. History remembers the M2 not only for its destructive power, but for what it represented, the convergence of industrial might, engineering mastery, and operational insight. While enemy aircraft faltered under mechanical limitations, American pilots soared with confidence, their actions amplified by a weapon that never failed. This reliability created a psychological advantage, a quiet but profound force that altered the dynamics of air engagement. Beyond strategy and tactics, the story of the Browning Ma-2 speaks to a broader human lesson. In moments of extreme stress and danger, the tools we trust can determine the line between survival and loss. For the men who flew through flak dogfights and the uncertainty of high-altitude skies, this half-inch gun embodied a lifeline, a promise kept through every burst of fire. In the end, the M2's legacy endures not only in museums or the continued use of its descendants, but in the philosophy it embodies that reliability, simplicity, and foresight are as vital as courage, skill, and determination. It reminds us that in both war and life, the instruments we rely on, and the care with which they are made, can shape outcomes far beyond what is immediately visible. The skies over Europe, the deserts of North Africa, and the Pacific Islands carry echoes of that truth, preserved in the memory of a weapon that pilots trusted above all else.